Well, good evening. Welcome to Didsbury FM. We've gone virtual. I hope you're staying safe. And for the next 12 weeks, 20 weeks, depending on whatever you want to believe, we're going to take Didsbury FM online here instead of going to the Met, which is shut. They emailed me to tell me they were going to do that. But I thought this would be a good way to connect with our community and keep an eye on everybody. Hi, Jim. All round in Didsbury, and have some of the local business owners come and tell us about what they're doing to keep afloat, and perhaps we'll find ways to support them in ways that we can. So tonight we've got two Didsbury. Is that your daughter, Jim?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So in a minute, I'm going to just ask everyone to just introduce themselves, and then I'll go through who we've got tonight. We've got Tim Lambert, and then we've got Helen from Food Sorcery. I feel like we should have some clapping now. And we all know about Food Sorcery, and we've got Lisa from Food Sorcery who works with Helen. So we'll be able to hear what Food Sorcery is and what they're doing given the crisis. I'm glad we've got Jim on, actually. We might be able to ask him some immunology questions. No. Jim's medical, but when he's not being medical, he's Extinction Rebellion. So, good evening, everyone. Oh, I can see everyone now. Can we just have a quick run through of who is with us tonight? Oh. Lisa, do you want to just say who you are, where you work?
Who are we starting with?
You, Helen.
Me?
Yes.
Just say you're Helen, you're from Food Sorcery.
Hi, I'm Helen. I'm from Food Sorcery Cookery School, based at the Waterside Hotel in Didsbury.
Brilliant. Next, I'm just going off my screen. Sarah?
Hi, everybody. I'm Tim Lambert. I run K Lambert Associates, which is a management training company based in Didsbury.
Great. Dawn?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
First time using it. Hi, I'm Dawn. I'm a stay-at-home mum, and I'm currently studying for a degree with the Open University.
Brilliant. You're very welcome. Sophie?
Hi, I'm Sophie Broeren. I'm a clinical psychologist at Salford Royal Hospital.
Excellent.
Isolation, so I'm not working at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
How do Jim is from Extinction Rebellion, and he's a psychologist. So, have I messed anybody out? No. Good.
Well done, Lisa.
When we get going, can I ask you all to maybe turn down your sound so that we can hear Tim?
No, you can mute the audience if you like. There should be a button that allows you to mute everybody.
Where's that button?
Oh, I don't know. You might have to get Rob.
You need Lisa to do an introduction, Sally.
Pardon?
You need Lisa to do an introduction.
I thought you'd not done one.
No, I'm Lisa. I work at Food Sorcery with Helen, who's over there on my screen.
She's up on mine.
She's over
there. Okay. Well, I think you can all hear me. I can't find the button which mutes you all, but can you all mute yourselves?
I can mute. If I mute myself, I mute everything.
No, I don't think you do. Sarah?
If you run your mouse over the Zoom screen, in the bottom left is a little microphone. You can click on it, and that should...
Okay, I'm just going to test it. All it is so that I can ask Tim questions, he can answer it. And once we finish, then we can ask questions. Then once we finish that Q&A, we'll move on to Helen and Lisa. So I'm going to press it now. Let me know if you can still hear me but you'll be muted. Is that okay?
Can't hear you. Can't hear you, Sally.
Okay, Sarah, that mute button mutes me.
Okay. We can't have that.
Don't mute Sally.
I don't quite know. Let's get going. Basically, let's get going. But whilst I'm doing the interview with Tim, perhaps you'd be kind enough sort of not to interrupt until I say questions, just as it happens in the pub. Is that okay?
Good.
Great. All right. So, Tim, welcome. You are a dad of 2 and you live locally in Didsbury, and you have done for quite some time. I think it's right, you're a management consultant. Is that right?
Yes, although specializing more in training and development.
Okay. What does that does that actually mean?
Well, some management consultants are actually there as business advisors who are, auditing a business or giving them advice on how to run their business in more productive ways. My focus is more on the people within the business, particularly the management population and the leadership population, and ensuring that they are suitably equipped and skilled to manage their people and their teams effectively. So that's through offering coaching services, one-to-one coaching, or running leadership development programs, or running employee surveys or things like that, so that they can effectively utilize their most precious resource, which is their people, in the most proficient way possible. Now, I wish I had one of those with me.
So do I.
I think we all do. So let's start off really with the elephant in the room. We're in, coronavirus, COVID-19. Sophie's self-isolating. I am, and social distancing. It's going to affect, and we'll ask Helen this question, businesses in many ways. Can we start with you? How is it going to affect you in your business?
So
sorry, no, Helen, sorry, apologies.
Sorry, Sally, are you asking me?
No, I'm asking Tim, and then I'll repeat the question to you.
Okay, well, hugely, because my business is all about human interaction and human contact. So the group programs that we would ordinarily run, which are face-to-face sessions, they've all been cancelled, or at least let's be a bit more optimistic. They've all been postponed for the time being. Hopefully, we'll start up again when this crisis is over. But certainly there's no face-to-face contact. So if we're running what would ordinarily be a program over a whole day with a group of people, and people I tend to work with are flying in from all over the world, then obviously all of that has absolutely stopped. With coaching can happen using Skype and Zoom and telephone and whatever. So those sort of activities can carry on. And myself and anybody in my position is just basically having to move across to virtual delivery. So utilizing whether it's Microsoft Teams or Adobe Connect or Skype or Zoom or the myriad of different programs that are out there that enable people to continue to function. But of course, you can't run a whole day's programming that way. I mean, really, if you're lucky, you can do maybe 2 hours tops. And it takes a lot more planning, actually, a lot of careful consideration about how to construct a session that is being done virtually, because trying to assess levels of engagement, keep people engaged, it's much more difficult than when they're all in a room together. So undoubtedly, the volume of work has absolutely plummeted. And we're rethinking how to continue to deliver what we do using different methods. The coaching is fine, but what we've decided to do is to actually embark on a long-term project, which is try to develop some of our own software, which would be available to teams at any point going forward, and that would enable them to keep in contact and focus on team development, which is really where we support them. So we facilitate team development activities, helping them grow and prosper and connect together and make good decisions. So we're developing some software which utilizes our material and our facilitating methodology, and hopefully that will be available before the end of the year. We'll have a prototype ready in a couple of months, but that's something then that we can sell on to teams to say, just because you can't be together doesn't mean you can't continue to learn together. And engage in playful activities that strengthen the competencies of the team. So our work has plummeted, but we're just putting our efforts into a bit of future proofing, I suppose.
Okay, well, good to hear. You should talk to Sarah, because Sarah's a coder and she makes software.
Fantastic.
So I don't want to hire her out services. Not Gemini, but if anyone's in need, she's very useful under Didsbury FM. So Tim, I want to just move on a bit. You've told us about management and leadership and the effect on you. So since you've been on Didsbury FM before, since you were last on, you've written a book called Forget About Burnout.
It's actually called To Hell with Burnout.
Oh, sorry, To Hell with Burnout. I don't think there are any young people listening. Jim, is your daughter in bed? To Hell with Burnout. So I want you to tell us, please, firstly, how did that come about and what tips can you give us? I've ordered the book, it's coming, but what's To Hell with Burnout, and how did you, as a management consultant, feel you were able to write a book on the subject?
Well, it's been about 25 years in the making, I suppose, because around about 25 years ago, I suffered from burnout. I found myself in a job, in a position. It was a perfect storm, really, of conditions. My son had recently passed away. I went into a very high-pressure, brand new job. I wasn't really ready for it. It wasn't the right job. The culture was awful. It wasn't drawing on my skills. It wasn't consistent with my values. The hours were long. It was just the most awful experience, and compounded by the fact that obviously I was still grieving. And I just collapsed at work. I just completely lost it. And I've recovered very successfully, and built a very happy life as a result of that. But I've always been very, very mindful of that experience, and ensuring that I never ever allowed myself to get into that situation ever again. So about 10 years ago, I started to think about, I really ought to start journaling this, and pulling together. I do so much training, I do a lot of coaching, I do a lot of facilitating, and I really ought to start applying some of this and some of the personal psychology to that experience. And so I started to reflect back on that experience and what had led up to it, how I dealt with it at the time, how I managed to recover from it, and just gradually started telling the story. But it was quite painful to revisit it, actually. And so I wrote quite a bit of it, and then I left it for a while, and then I kept coming back to it, and then I showed it to my wife, who gave me some fantastic structural advice.
But she is a BAFTA award-winning writer.
Yeah, she's a novelist. She's a published author, and and one of the things that she's fantastic. Well, she's fantastic at many things, but one is she's brilliant with feedback. She's very incisive, but she's highly qualified. She really understands structure. So it went back and forward for a while, and then I lost heart with it, and then I picked it up probably about a year ago and did a real good cleanup on it, let's say. To the point when the coronavirus hit, I thought now is the time to actually pull this together and get it out there. So the book is personal. It's full of my story, and I tell stories as well of people I've met along the way who I've coached or I've worked with, and it's quite self-revelatory. But it's also, I hope, at the end of the day, a very optimistic book, because I had burnout. it was awful. I was on the floor, and I'm in a very, very different place now. So the book is designed to equip people with some of the skills to be able to, first of all, spot it when it might be happening, and that's really important, and then take decisive action before it gets too bad. But also recognizing some people don't take that action before it gets too bad, and they do find themselves in the situation that I was in. So how do they pull themselves back out of that? And I talk about the phoenix rising from the ashes, that having been so low that you can't really go any lower, how you can rebuild after that. And it can be actually very cathartic and a very productive process. So it's full of tips and strategies, things that, practical solutions, psychological solutions. A lot of it is to do with how you think about situations, about your levels of optimism. So hopefully people will find it entertaining as well as instructive.
Yeah, fantastic. So do you think you were ready to write it, to release it now?
Yeah, I think I'm old and grey now. So the fact that, I do say on the cover of the book that it's not something. It is like mental illness. I mean, it's a form of mental illness, having burnout, and we shouldn't be coy about it. I do recognise I have been coy about it for quite a lot of my career, but the older I've got, I've just become more comfortable about just being completely open with people and saying, listen, I've been there. I've been in that situation. I know what that situation feels like. And I don't have to be coy about it. I don't have to be apologetic about it either. It's not a question of blaming circumstances or blaming myself or blaming anyone else. It's just, it was a situation I found myself in, but hey, there's a way back. So let's get that story out there and let's give people hope. And we all need a bit of that right now.
Absolutely. And of course it affects performance, doesn't it? But burnout totally affects performance. Tim, thank you so much for sharing that with you. I just want to ask you two quick questions really, and then we'll go to the audience for some questions. Is everyone all right for a drink? Yes, great. Yeah.
It's bedtime for you all.
Who's that? It's probably Jim. Jim, is that you? Jim's daughter.
No.
So Tim, the last two questions I really wanted to ask you. One was about.
Zoom meeting.
Are you there? It's
Yes.
about your son passing away.
Yes.
And those circumstances of his death, which I think has really affected you really all that time. Do you think one ever gets over grieving for a child? How have you managed to cope with it?
I'm not sure you get over. You just get on, and that's not about denial. It's just you carry it with you, and you put it into a box, I suppose, and that box gets opened occasionally, and it can still feel quite raw at times, but you accommodate it. I think that's what you do. I think that's how I've dealt with it. I mean, it's a tough one. Do you ever get over it? You never stop thinking.
No.
About him, and when I talk about, I have two. I have three children, but I have two children who are alive. I have two existing children, but I've actually got three children, and that Saul, my son, is still very much part of this family in my life and my understanding of the world. So he never leaves us. He's a very real presence, but obviously he's not here, and the grieving doesn't really stop, because with a parent, you expect at a certain point the parents that they've fulfilled what they wanted to fulfill and they're coming towards the end of their life. With a child, you're always asking the question, what would they have become?
Yeah.
and so various milestones, you know, the 21st birthday, the point at which he might have gone to university, you know, what job would he be doing now, all of those things. And because I have another son who's 14 now, I'm very conscious as I observe my 14-year-old son go through life and navigate his way through this very complex, tricky world. I'm often thinking, you know, is this how Saul would have been before him, years before him? So in a way, Fred has to live up to a lot, I suppose. Fortunately, he does, and he wears it extremely well because he's an incredible child, incredible boy, and very, very proud of him. But at the same time, I do often find myself looking at him and thinking, is this what Saul would have been like? So, and that's where you become aware of the loss. You know that there's a loss. Occasional tears, occasional moments of you know, where you just have to give in to it. But on the whole, yeah, it's an accommodation. You just learn to live with it. You never choose it. You just get on with it.
Yeah, thank you. So Tim, two very quick questions then. Firstly, are you on safari? I'm looking at the pictures in the background.
Wow, this is interesting because, yeah, we've just been talking about my son, haven't we? Well, my son loves giraffes. He's crazy about giraffes. And this used to be his bedroom before he got so big that we had to move him into a much bigger space. And when we decorated it for him some years ago, he was really keen to have giraffes. So we got this giraffe wallpaper. So it's the whole wall. In fact, there's some over, you might not be able, there's some over there as well in the corner, little one with his head sticking up. And and it's beautiful. Yeah, and in his new bedroom now, he's got about 50 giraffes of all shapes and sizes and pictures. And yeah, his dream is to go on safari, actually, and stay in a special hotel in Kenya. I think it's called the Giraffe Manor. Manor. Yeah, that's what he'd love to do more than anything. So maybe one day we'll get in there.
Yeah, well, you best start saving. And the final question is really, I know we always ask about community. We are about community. I know that you have bought Food Sorcery Foods, who are coming up next to be interviewed, as a way of just helping the community. But what can we do as a community now that we are in a pandemic and people are not listening about social distancing? What can we do to help businesses and the people who live around the corner and all of that? Have you got sort of 3 quick tips that you can share with us?
Well, I mean, I live on Gadham Road, and Gadham Road has got a WhatsApp group, and it's a very, very, right now, it's an incredibly busy WhatsApp group. So people are using that as a way of keeping in touch with people and looking out for people, checking in on people. You know, the other day, you know, we did a prescription run to the local chemist and dropped all the prescriptions off at various people's doors on Gadham Road, for instance. And that's really, really important. I mean, I think what this coronavirus has done is it's unleashed imagination and creativity, and people are a bit more daring about trying new ways to connect rather than allowing us all to fall into isolation. So we've been talking about self-isolation, but I mean, the worst thing that could happen is that people feel isolated from their community. So anything like that, just putting little notes through the door, signing up on WhatsApp groups, just keeping your eyes open, listening out for people is really, really important. In terms of supporting the community, and particularly the traders in Didsbury, I mean, that's a really tough one at the moment, because the government obviously needs to step in to protect those businesses, because they're viable businesses under any other circumstances, but they're just not viable now in this climate. And so that, you know, they need government support. We can't even help them that much because we can't even access their services. but where we can, we certainly should. So Food Sorcery, brilliant idea to go into the prepared meals business throughout this process, and encouraging as many people as possible to purchase from there. Because the food is brilliant, and also the price is pretty darn good as well. So
Well, I was going to say, and for people living on, I have a few neighbours who live on their own, and I'm thinking it's actually quite nice to get some chefed.
Absolutely, really good quality food.
Yeah, not just frozen meals when they're available. So
yes.
That's great. Well, listen, that's enough from me asking questions for now. Can I ask our audience, if you've got a question, to say who you are and what your question is, and Tim will answer it. Sarah's looking a bit stressed. Is that children not in bed, or is that because I've overrun on the timing, Sarah?
No, you're all right for time, I think. You should have 10 minutes of questions.
Brilliant. Okay, let's get starting. Hello, Armani. Thanks for joining us. So who's got a question? Is that Sophie? Are you putting your hand up? Hi, Claire. Can you all see each other? If you stroll across the screen, you can just see, we can all just say a virtual hi to everyone and pretend we're in the Met.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
Right, so if you've got a question, you want to just put your hand up. I can see all of you on my screen, but I suspect you all can't see one another. Helen, you've got a question.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Helen.
You said before that you hope the corporates are going to come back and your business will come back at the end. How have you found companies with that sort of level of commitment, and what have they been able to do to reassure you that they're going to come back and fulfill any of those bookings that they had?
Well, first of all, their obligation is to their staff, not to me. So I understand and appreciate that that's their first job, to protect their staff and to ensure that they have set their businesses up appropriately so that their staff are safe and can continue to be productive. In terms of coming back, I think they will come back, but I think that the ground will have shifted so significantly when this crisis is over that nothing's really going to be the same again. And I think about schools being closed, and from Friday my son's off school, but from Monday every class that he would ordinarily have gone to is going to be conducted using Microsoft Teams from his school. Yeah. So I think that we are going to be forced to use, in order just to keep business going, just to keep in contact, we're going to be forced to taking full advantage of all of the different technologies that exist. And I think that people will become more familiar with them. As a result, it might be they don't want to go back. A lot of people have been sent home and are working from home, and a lot of them will find that's fantastic. One of my clients has always been very resistant to the idea of home working. And I've had many a discussion with them about it, trying to explain the merits of it. And they've been very anti it. And, it boils down to trust, really. Are your staff going to be as productive? Are they actually going to work if they're at home? Well, that particular client has now been forced to send all their people home and set up remote working. And I think what they will find is the people who are productive when they come to the office are also going to be productive when they're working from home. Yeah. If they weren't productive in the office, they're not going to be productive when they're at home. Okay? So when this is over, I think there will be such a change in the way that we work together and do business